we're going to do tonight, huh? About 1 minute.
Longest minute.
Move the crowd.
Reserve seats.
Oh, yes, I don't think we can fit you in tonight. I don't think we can.
Price of seats has gone up.
Yeah, or down, or whatever.
You'll see as the months go by, we start putting in the reserves.
Maybe we could put some cutout people in. It is 5:30 on the dot, according to the clock, and calling our work session, our special meeting to order. Dr. Watts?
Yes, I will begin, first of all, welcoming everyone. Thank you. And this evening, I will call on our Chief Learning Officer, Danelle West, to begin our presentation and also introduce our esteemed leaders and staff members for our Arts 2020 and Beyond presentation.
Thank
Danelle?
you. Good evening, President Hamada, Dr. Watts, Ms. Howley, Ms. Laramie. I'm really excited to bring Dr. Christopher White and Dr. Christine Horbley to share an update on our arts program. Just to give you a little context about Chris's role, Chris is the coordinator of arts, music, PE, and world language. Tonight, we're really going to focus on arts, and later, I believe this school year, we've requested to do another teaching and learning update that will provide the opportunity to talk about some of the other programs in teaching and learning that we typically don't provide an update on. So we're hoping to have that before the end of the school year. So without further ado,
With just one quick question, was there a reason why we pulled PE tonight off of the
yes.
work session at the last minute?
Yes. So typically, the way the presentation that has happened over the years has always been an arts update. We thought we would be able to add PE to this evening session, but with Dr. White supervising multiple programs, we decided to chunk in two, and then his other program update will be in the other teaching and learning updates before the end of the school year.
Perfect. I just had some community members that asked, so.
Okay, we typically don't provide an update. Historically, we haven't provided an update on PE.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to invite Dr. Corbley and Dr. White. And the way our presentation is structured this evening, we'll kind of give context of where we are with our program at this time. We will shift into our vision for how we'd like to grow the program. And in between, there may be opportunities for us to engage in some activities so that we can fully immerse ourselves in the work that we do in the arts programs.
So we're here to talk about our current arts program and what our vision is for arts in the future. Right. So where are we right now? So a little bit of data about our students, where we're at. About 100% of our 5th and 6th graders participate in some sort of music. About 43% are in band, 20%, 27% in orchestra, and 30% in general music. What's interesting about this data is you can see there's a significant drop-off in our band orchestra programs when students hit middle school and high school. And we would, in the future, like to see that number a little bit higher, that the kids continue. And then as you look at our arts program, our art really, and then we pick up choir in middle school. There's some volunteer choir programs in some of our elementary schools, but we then pick up formal choir classes when we get to the middle school. I believe 4 of our 6 schools have choir programs starting in middle school. And then you can see our art numbers, and these are the percentage of our students at each grade level that are participating in art. And much of our art is CTE art. So we have a lot of classes, CTE classes, that students get art credit for. And so between those two, you can see that about 35% of our kids participate in some sort of art class in our district. We also wanted to recognize that at the elementary level right now, we have about 55 staff members serving our elementary students in music. And then you can see the breakdown band. There's 9 orchestra and 5 choir staff members. And then there are 9 art teachers and 18 CTE art teachers. And they would be not necessarily teaching 6 classes of it, but might be teaching 1 or 2 classes. So we think it's also important to look at what are we offering at each of our levels. So we have in general music, K4, all of our general music K4 students take general music. And then in 5th and 6th grade, they make a choice. Do they want to be in band? Do they want to be in orchestra? Or would they like to continue in general music? And so they choose that. We then have band, orchestra, and choir in our middle schools. There's a band and orchestra in every middle school, and there are 4 choir programs. So 2 of our middle schools do not have choir at this time. And then again, at high school, we have 1 high school that does not have choir classes. When we start to look at visual arts, our arts at the elementary school are run by docents, volunteer docents for the most part, who come in and work with teachers. We have some dedicated art teachers at the middle school level. And you can see that we have a variety of visual arts programs, from painting to IB, film, history courses. When we look at, we have some media arts, those are mostly at our CTE programs, so that would be a variety of classes. We do have some theater classes, directing, and our IB theater arts. And another piece of the arts is dance, and right now we don't offer any dance, although there are some voluntary dance programs being run in our district by volunteers.
And when we look at the arts across the board in Washington, no matter which of the 5 arts areas we have, they all have the same basic categories of standards. And they each relate subtly different, but the overall it's, we have 11 anchor standards across these 4 areas. First one, creating, the first 3 standards, where they have to conceptualize, create the ideas, generate the ideas on their own. They organize and develop the artistic ideas and work, so that's a refining piece of it. And they continue to refine and complete the artistic work as part of their, as part of the standards in there, and there are substandards in those areas. Then we go to performing, or in art, in the case of visual art, we call it producing. And so they select and analyze and interpret their artistic work for presentation. So they look at their own body of work, and they start making their own artistic decisions based on well-developed criteria. Develop and refine artistic work for presentation, whether that be in performance or in show. And then they look to convey meaning through the presentation of that artwork, and that word meaning is something that we will be focusing on a lot this evening. Third piece is responding to the various arts. Perceive and analyze the artistic work. Interpret intent and meaning in the artistic work. And to apply criteria to evaluate that artistic work. And that's not just based on good or bad, that's based upon how it fits into societal means, how it fits into culture, how it fits into their personal life. Lastly, it's connecting it to music, the other arts, and other disciplines outside the art and the community. Synthesize and relate knowledge and personal experiences to make art, and to relate artistic ideas and works with societal, cultural, and historical context to deepen understanding. So our vision, and our vision statement. to provide a diverse and rigorous education in the arts for all students, one that seeks to foster independent thinking and includes a variety of experiences in creating, performing, and responding to all art forms. Through engagement in the arts, students will make connections that lead them to construct meaning and understanding of the world around them. With fidelity to the intrinsic value of each of the arts, students will enhance the skills of perceiving, expressing, reflecting, and reasoning in order to better prepare them for college, career, and a richer, more meaningful life. Okay. Not lofty goals at all. So at this point, I'd like to see if we can engage in a little bit of that meaning making with our world. So, audience participation part of the program, if you all want to stand up here. And if you'll notice, we've got 4 pictures on the wall over here and 4 pictures on the wall over here. So if you'd like to come and select one of those works, we'll take just about 30 seconds and let you scan them, and pick one of those works that speaks to you in some way.
We're going this side or?
Either side.
Oh,
Both sides. Find one that speaks to you. And when you've made your selection, come on back over here and gather around and make kind of we'll do a standing circle around the table here so everyone can see everybody. Everyone feel free to join in. Now your task, having found a picture that you identify with that has some connection that you will, is number 1, to release all of your inhibitions. Number 2, to trust that we're in a safe environment here doing this. And number 3, to physically become the picture. So with the picture that you selected, take about 10 seconds and get this in your head, and I'll count down after that, and we'll all together morph ourselves into the picture that we selected, okay? Take a moment to think about it.
Clarifying question.
Yes, sir.
All of us individually, or are we coming together to?
Individually.
Okay.
So whichever one you selected, go. That's part of the fun, because we're going to find out what speaks to everybody here. Okay. Having done that, and we are ready to make our selections or make our pose in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, good. So let's look at that, and anyone want to shout out here, what is it that spoke to you about the character that you selected, about the painting you picked? Yes.
Hi, I'm Brittany Clay. The one that spoke out to me was this woman with the necklace. She's like, it's almost like she's elongating her body into a proud pose, and she's looking out. She's not looking down. She's not really looking away. It looks like she's looking thoughtfully at something, but she's in like a proud stance.
Very good. I like the connection that you made with the proud, with the elongation and the posture as having indicated that. So we see that there. Very good. Someone else? Yes.
I selected the second from the right photo over there, the woman seated in the chair. Just the intensity of the emotion that seems to be on her face is something that's very notable.
Okay. What was it about that picture that gave you the idea of intensity?
Just the facial expression, the fact that her face is kind of pointed downward and she seems to be focusing on her thoughts rather than a particular object.
Okay, good. Yes.
and I also selected that. It's a passion of mine to work with people of color. I've done that in my mentoring. I actually thought the person was praying. That was my interpretation, and in deep thought of that, some deep meditation about that. There's an extreme look on her face of the intensity of the world on her shoulders, looking down, asking for guidance, for help.
Wonderful. And the beauty of art when we get here, we have a great opportunity with the same selection and two different interpretations. But I ask, the question I pose is, are they really different interpretations? So our next question, when we evaluate a work of art, we would ask ourselves, number one, what are the pieces that the artist chose that conveyed that message to us? Which both of our participants here did a good job of, verbalizing here and explaining to us. And then the effect that that had upon you. Now, do we have a shared experience from that, even though it wasn't exactly the same? And what we had is a shared intensity to it. And both of the emotions that came out of that, the meaning that was drawn away, comes from the same area, comes from the same type of place, though subtly different. So there was a powerful sense to it, and a very empowering sense to it, which I think was very good. It's great that we were able to make that connection. Awesome. Let's do it like one more. Okay.
My interpretation, it's the woman on the end that has less of form. And so when you think about some of the in contrast to theirs, where there's this obvious intensity that you can take with the emotion, there are things that I took away from that. So I still saw this kind of pensive and thought piece, but it related to me in interpretation. I had a debate for just a second of, is she holding something under that other arm? Because it could be a form of part of her body, but it could also be like, so I thought about, well, she's got the spoon and she's got the cup, and it could be a tea and it could be a spoon for a saucer. But like maybe she's feeding the little person. So like mom is there, but like she's also kind of being pensive about it. And so I thought of like this kind of, I'm being thoughtful, I'm doing something, I'm thinking about this thing. But it's also somewhat undefined. So.
Well, now I'm going to ask you to define that, because we're going to take this to the next step here. So with the picture that you selected, okay, I want to count down one more time, and I'd like to go ahead and have you assume that posture, assume the face with as much intensity as there is in that picture coming out at you. But we're going to add one more element, and that element is this. I want you to assume the voice of that person, and what it would sound like, and specifically what they were saying, would they be saying with 1, 2, or at most 3 words. So what are they saying in this moment, in this viewing, with that expression to you? Okay, give you 10 seconds to think about it. So number one, let's try it all together. On the count of 5, we're going to just assume the posture. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And then on the countdown from 3, everyone say your word at the same time. 3, 2, 1.
I am here.
What a nice variety. What a great variety. So, Jewel, I'm going to come back to you. Would you mind sharing what you said and the voice that you placed into your character?
I just said, because I think she's thinking about something. So something is on her mind, but it's worth thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't convey an emotion that is necessarily positive or negative, or intense in a way that would cause you to take on that emotion, other than there's something that I'm pondering or doing that's important enough for me to persist upon. So for me, that's just kind of a, like I'm thinking about it. So there's an energy noise to it, but it's not good or bad or a word, other than I guess I have to put real words to it. I'm thinking. Or please wait, like processing or something.
I will share, I had the same picture. It was funny because I was like, what? And then I'm home too, and I didn't know Jules, and I thought, just like on the same page. But I think about being in the nothing box. Because I can view the long ways, and I do a lot of thinking. There's times that I'm not thinking, I'm just like, nothing. And when I looked at that picture, it made me think of being in the nothing box. You're doing something, you're drawing, you're reading. Sometimes there's just so much interactions and things that are going on in life that you just, you're nowhere. So that's what made me think.
Good. I'm going to come back in a minute. Do we have one more?
I just said, Father, forgive them.
Good. And that goes with the prayer they had to pray. And yours?
I had the first picture as well, and it's so interesting. I was sort of saying it at the same
Mhm.
Yeah.
You're not gonna get,
Definitely.
you know, sort of a bold look of, nothing's gonna stop me.
That's funny, because mine transformed into I am willing to take on. So
Uh-huh,
I am
right.
willing, I'm open to take whatever comes to me
Right.
and move forward with it. So we had very similar to this call.
Well, the power that the art has is that the more we experience it, the more we return to it in different ways, it changes our perspective each time. Once you experience something once, you can't experience it the same way again. So it becomes transforming each time. I think it's interesting when we look at the piece over there in the corner that you describe it the way, because when we're talking about cubism here, not to get too technical, we're talking about the concept of multiple perspectives simultaneously. Multiple inputs, multiple perspectives, multiple things happening within a single body. And I think that relates real well. So the last piece of this, and this is just a think about it piece, because we need to move on, but the thing about it is, what is our line of inquiry? What are the questions that we want to answer next? Because viewing a piece of work once does not do it. We need to continue. Or how is this experience going to affect how we view the next work? Or how is it going to affect how we go about and do things? What's the personal meaning that we draw from it? Thank you very much, everyone. So let's talk about what this vision is going to look like, we hope. Okay. And it's this. We have kind of 4 phases that we can look at, or 4 ways that arts can manifest themselves into our curriculum. The first one is through arts enhancement. Arts enhancement is where we use the subjects of art, the 5 different subjects that we had there, in order to help support the other areas, but we don't assess them necessarily for their own standards. They're part and parcel too, but they are not identified there. And we would hope to start integrating that in and making that arts enhancement a focus in our young students of the K-2, because that's when it can be very powerful for them to do that. We move from arts enhancement to arts integration, which is a connective focus. How can the arts actually connect into and be part of that? And in that, in our upper elementary grades 3 through 6, that we would hope to be doing this, and in such a way that not only are we using the art in conjunction with another subject, the arts, but we are also beginning to assess it based upon its own standards and teaching it for its own rigor and fidelity. Then as we move into the middle grades, grades 6 through 8, middle school, we start to get that wonderful new term that we have STEM now moving to STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And so what we do is, this is discovery. What we want to do is we want to solve problems. This is a project of problem-based learning where we present students with a thing that needs to be solved, and they draw upon all of these areas and their backgrounds in all of these areas in order to solve these problems and create new ideas and make new connections that way. But they have to have this strong background in all of these areas, arts included, otherwise there's no theme, it's just STEM. And lastly, we continue what we're doing now in teaching the arts as its own unique entity, its own unique, intense focus, where we teach art for the value of art. We teach music for the value of music and those standards that are intrinsic to it, that we start adding more and more theater and bring it in for its own subject matter, and then hopefully dance as well. So the program shifts that are going to have to take place in order for this vision to happen. Okay. At the very beginning, in pre-kindergarten through 3rd grade, what we want to look at is start moving towards a motion of daily participation, a daily experience in music. So rather than the twice weekly that we have now, that we would move it to 30 minutes, 4 days a week. And that would, of course, be taught by music specialists, people specially trained to do this. Then beginning in 4th grade, we're going to start exploring more of the world of music making, although that'll have been doing up to this time, but more formalized, by doing a units by quarter, where they're going to be exploring what we would call life instruments. Fretted instruments like ukulele and eventually guitar, but they're not quite ready for that in size yet. Keyboard instruments, piano and small keyboards. Percussion instruments of all kinds. Recorder to start exploring wind instruments. And then, of course, singing, which is the natural instrument for all of us. It's the primary instrument for everybody. The choral experience that would be embedded across it, and movement and music, which are matched together, actual lockstep, would be embedded all the way across it. Okay? Next, when we get into 5th grade, we're going to continue with a model similar to, but not identical to what we have now. General music would continue. Students would have that option, but we would start to change what that general music looks like. We would start to look at continuing that 4th grade era of those instruments and exploring those types of ensembles making, plus the traditional ensembles. In the standards, they call it traditional and emerging ensembles of band and orchestra, and hopefully adding choir to that as well. But we want to change the way that instructs, so rather than large groups, we can imagine having 40 kids in a room with 7 different instruments all starting at the exact same time. And that's pretty difficult to do, and we're not getting the mastery. And that's part of the reason that I believe, and when we talk to students, that's part of the reason that we're not getting the transition from 6th grade into 7th grade, because we're just not getting enough skill attainment. They would still continue general music, one lesson per week. And then the small groups would also have their 30 minutes per week as in larger groups, okay? And onward. We would engage in 7th through 12th grade. We'd continue to engage in our traditional ensembles, band, orchestras, and choirs. We'd start adding in arts exploration courses, because one of the most important things in this vision is we allow students who choose not to move on in the actual act of music making to still engage in music and art and dance and theater. So even though if they choose not to necessarily draw or paint or sculpt or play an instrument, they still have these experiences in the art that are so essential. National standard in music and national standard in art say that they should have musical and art experience from kindergarten through grade 9, independent of any ensemble or independent of any production type course like design, painting, or drawing. Okay, and then lastly, we want for the inclusive ed for those students with special needs and issues like that, we would like to start looking at bringing on board national board certified music therapists and art therapists to work with that, not only with that specific clientele, but to also work with the entire IE office for social emotional learning and to help enhance our services for that special population. Okay, and then lastly, this the PK6 general art. In this piece, and that's not on the slide, on the paper in front of you, not on the slide, but we really want to make sure that we start integrating in art as its own subject with that instruction in elementary school, and that they get that weekly experience once a week because they need the longer length of time because of setup, tear down, clean down, and the nature of the activity. So as we go to phase this in, we have to look over a 3-year plan to get us there. Well, we'd love to be able to do it all this fall, and realism is going to keep us away from that. So this coming fall, we start looking at hopefully getting those therapists in to work with those populations and help guide us in those areas. At the same time, to phase in this new 4th grade curriculum in music, that new exploratory that's in there. And we're going to start setting the stage. In fall of 2021, we want to implement that full new structure we talked about for PK through 6 general music and the beginning of instruments. We want to be in full implementation at that point. Also during that time period, we want to begin to develop that art exploration, the STEAM courses, especially at the middle school level, at the time when they can explore all those things and start that trouble solving and make that connection that needs to move them on and make them successful in life. Fall of 2022, we've set the stage. Now we want to introduce that K6 general art. We hopefully at that point have full curricula in place, and we can be hired certified, qualified staff to be teaching that. And we want to implement the music labs in grades 7 through 12. And the music lab is just a student said, I didn't begin in 5th grade, I didn't begin in 6th grade, but I want to begin now. Or I want to take up a new instrument, I want to take a guitar or keyboard, and we do not want to lose them at that point because we don't have an entry. So we want to make sure that our students have entry points all the way along the way. And at that same time period, we want to continue to increase these non-performance-based courses. not just in music, but in art across, in all the areas, these courses for people that don't necessarily want to be in that act of arts making, but still want to be able to have that arts experience. Okay? So if we have, if I can plug into the sound here. Technical difficulty, please stand by. Where is the sound plugin?
It's usually over here. This is,
Here we go.
if your case is on.
It's in. Okay. So, if we can right there, if you can listen to this, and as we've listened through, think in terms of, if you've heard the piece before, don't worry about that. But what we really want to do is just get your reaction to what the piece is. What are the questions that come up? And specifically, what do we hear? What's the stuff? Don't worry about defining it in musical terms. Don't worry about being accurate with anything. Just what is your guttural reaction and how would you describe what's going on? If you want to take some notes there and just, you know, if you hear something happen, just write it down in whatever descriptive term you happen to have. Okay? Hopefully this will be there. And the answer is no. Okay? So that's said. How about if I just go into the computer here real quick? Okay.
Put the knife under your thing.
I will do that.
That'll work.
We do all this high-tech stuff and we'll go low. Okay. Okay. So we listened to that. What is your first reaction? What do you think that's about?
Pomp and circumstance.
Okay. How so?
It just draws your attention with the crescendo of the tone, reaching higher and higher, you know. It almost, when it first started, it reminded me of when I see the ocean when it's really hitting against the rocks. And just something as big is going to happen.
It reminded me of old classic Western shows, TV shows.
Okay.
I went into Bonanza.
Yeah.
Scott
So
Wright.
something big and bold and big as all outdoors, right?
Classic show.
Good. Classic in that way. Sir?
Oh,
He's looking around.
I'm still reflecting. All right. No, it reminded me of the symphony. I mean, as simple as it sounded, it was, I was sitting in a comfortable seat, watching and listening to musicians playing the trumpet and bass drum. It just reminded me. Yeah.
I think it's the Olympics, right? I mean, it reminds me of, it's something that's an introduction to the Olympics, isn't it?
Mhm.
That's where I think I've heard it, okay.
So the Olympics, good.
I think, yeah, movie. I was thinking of different movies, trying to place a
That's it,
movie.
yeah.
Well, it's been used in a lot of movies.
Yeah.
That's happened.
Yeah, I was actually, it almost made me think of the military service. Lost business and
the energy, and passion and music.
Oh, good. You know, I've done this a whole bunch of times, and every time we always come up with the same themes. Doesn't matter whether I use kindergartners or whether we use adults with it, it's always across the same. And it's always something heroic. You know, we always get someone with that military theme. A lot of times it's knights and chivalry and that type of stuff. It depends on the age group. Young kids like to say knights and dragons and things like that. But we always get that same basic idea. So we need to go after that. And if we had more time, I would definitely go after that to see what is it that draws us to it. We can talk about a couple things. How did the piece begin?
The whatever, the
Crescendo.
symphonic.
Yeah, we had a big bang, didn't we?
Yeah.
Big and bang and a boom, right off the top. It got our attention. And when you perform that piece live, most audiences jump out of their seats, which is real good. And then what happened?
Soft.
Horns and stuff.
Repetitive, scale.
Now, to get a little bit technical, were they all playing the same thing or were they playing different things? Remember?
It's the same tone.
We get there eventually. I'm going to back up just a little bit in the meaning, and we talk about this. If, let's say, you know, I got to watch The Greatest Showman just recently, okay? So I'm going to pull my P.T. Barnum out here real quick, okay? So I've got something to sell you. I can sell you that I can make you live 7 years longer on average, and that for that 7 years and the life leading up to it, you will be healthier. I also coordinate the health area, so I know this stuff, okay? So I can do this. Are you willing to believe me? Are you willing to buy what I'm selling? 7 years longer and healthier when you do it.
No.
Okay, let me go this way. It'll cost you less than 2 pennies a day.
No.
Wouldn't want to live 7 years longer for 2 pennies? Actually, it's a half a penny a day. Would you be willing to do this for half a penny a day to live 7 years longer and be healthier all those years?
I would.
Willing to listen?
Yes, yeah.
You know what it is? Floss.
Yeah.
People who've lost their teeth live 7 years longer on average and are healthier
Not the
than
dentist.
6 years off.
But-
But we can't convince people to do something, that little simple thing, right? How many dental campaigns? Well, this piece was charged, in January of 1945, it was charged to write a fanfare, 15 composers to write a fanfare that would rally the country to a cause, convince people to do something that they weren't ready to do. Which would have been what?
Go to war.
Go to war. Because in December of 41 was Pearl Harbor. What did we start with? We started with explosions. If we listened carefully, we'd go to subsequent listening. It would have been a gong in there that started off well, so that's going to cue us in where it came from. And it's a series of one that fade off in the distance. And then we have trumpets unison. One sound. Why does it sound military? Because they're playing big open intervals that bugles play. It sounds military. He evoked that. Play that. We get the explosions again. Then we get the melody again, but this time it's not just the trumpets, it's the French horn, but they're not playing the exact same part, they're playing parallel, they're going side by side. More explosions. A new group starts the theme, but another group comes in, and they're all still playing the same theme. It's the same melody that we've had several times now. And they're playing along this way. And then at one point, one group goes way up high and one group is way down low, and they come together, and they meet in the middle. And they kind of mull it around, and they mull around. At the very end, it goes up, the way the piece ends, it ends up way on a high note with a drum roll, but it doesn't sound like its end. Why would that be? It was premiered on April 15th, 1945. Why would the piece not end? Sorry, it was premiered in 1942. April 15th, 1942. Why would the piece not sound like it ended? Yeah, we don't know what we're going to win. We don't know what's going to happen. The piece is Henry Copeland's Fanfare for the Common Man. And he wrote this to invoke a feeling. And I think we all get it, this idea that it's going to be one person stepping forward, joined by all of us in common voice towards a cause. And that we all have to cover it. It's not for the aristocracy, it's not fanfare for the army, it's not fanfare for the armed services, it's fanfare for the common man, that we all have to do this. It's a challenge to all of us. Incredibly powerful piece. Does he succeed in conveying that message? That's where we draw meaning from the arts. Does he succeed in conveying that? And can we succeed in drawing that? And that's the type of meaning that we need programs like this to make sure that our students can draw this towards their life, that they can apply this to all their areas, and they can make this happen. That's why it's essential. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you this evening.
So one little past piece, we want to make sure we're recognizing the partnerships that we are developing around the arts. And so Chris has been working really hard to develop some partnerships to help us develop skills. Many of you know about our Music for Life partnership, where we have gotten over 30 instruments. We had a baby grand piano delivered to KR this last week, and because theirs needed replacement, and Music for Life happened to have one, and so they were able to get a baby grand. And so that's been a significant partnership in the last 2 years to gather more instruments for our students. Of course, this Kent Schools Foundation has been supporting arts and grants to teachers around arts, as well as supporting Music for Life. Chris has been working with the Kent Art Commission, who has also given us grants for various projects. And we've begun to develop some partnerships with our local art museums in order to both provide professional development for our teachers, as well as to provide opportunities for our students to experience a museum, an art museum in our community. So with that, we are open for questions.
What do you project that this is going to cost the district in additional educated, certificated, in specialized fields, and also the space to do this, and what's the plan for that?
Well,
You can start. Okay. So, really, when we think about the board certified specialists, like that's phase one. And what we'll do is, if we look at our average teacher salary, we can anticipate for any new certificated positions that we bring on board, that would be the estimated cost to make that program come to life. Now, space, I can't really speak so much about the construction costs to build new space, but our schools have been, I think, relatively creative and innovative in trying to find space where appropriate to support our music and arts programs. I think as we continue to add multi-purpose rooms to our elementary schools where that hasn't been in place in the past, I think we can continue to expand the classroom experience for students at each school. So we could actually begin to put together a specific budget around really growing our arts program. One of the things that, as you can tell from Dr. White's presentations, even at the state of the district, and maybe even from our own elementary or school experiences, having art and music be a regular part of your instructional experience is important. it not only adds like a layer of value to your learning experience, it also adds relief for students who need to express themselves in other ways. So we can put together a budget around this and what it would cost to add the additional staffing that it would take. Right now, if we look at some of our itinerant staff, we have teachers out there that if we had a program and structure that allowed them to be full-time in buildings, we could begin to build that and not necessarily add significant cost.
Well, I'm hearing from the community that they want a lot more arts and music, so I think this is encouraging. But I'm also hearing that we've already got music and arts and PE classes that don't even have any space, and they're overloaded.
You were finished with your question?
Yeah, I mean, I just 1 second, please. I'm just hearing that right now we have some serious problems with space with this, and I mean, all of this sounds wonderful, and I'm for it. I got a minor in music, so I understand the importance of this, but I'm just wondering how, if we can't do what we can do now very well, where's it going to go?
I'm sorry if I may, as far as the music staffing in this plan, the music staffing would stay basically flat because we're talking about a restructuring to that. But by some of the things that we're doing, by moving the instrumental to a pull-out program and by changing the way that we offer and deliver some things, will actually provide a certain amount of relief upon the facilities that we have now, because we're not going to demand those large facilities. We're able to push out into the smaller facilities, use the smaller rooms for things, use portables that are available now, instead of having to take up a large facility in order to do this, by the way we're talking about that. The big expense that we're talking about, I believe, in this program is staffing in art, which, as you know, we don't have any at the elementary level. So that would be the staffing.
Is there any, I mean, this sounds wonderful. I like this plan. It just, I know we're in the middle of a school year and you can't probably change things around, but if we have an immediate problem with overcrowdedness, is there anything we can do to alleviate that?
Well, this is one of the reasons we wanted to talk about, here's the vision, and this is the ideal context that we want to have for our arts program. And we have a phased rollout, and as you can see, some of these things don't happen until 4 or 5 years from now. And we are building new buildings. It's going to require us looking at master scheduling very differently. And once we map out like what would be the ideal schedule and what are the flexible options that you can find within your building, that would be the approach that we would take to make this happen. It's particularly at our elementary levels where there is limited space available, and like I said, our schools have been very creative in how they're finding space to provide these services to students. We may have to look at it with an integrated program and the program pushing into the classroom. That's not necessarily having a separate space for that to happen. Is someone pushing into the classroom to provide those services. So there are a variety of ways that we could look at this. I think what we found this year, you know, unfortunately, we had a change to the scheduling for our specials at the elementary level, and that created a lot of immediate adjustments that needed to happen. And I think, you know, Dr. Corbley, Dr. White did a very good job in trying to assess and coordinate and provide support around that. But most importantly, our schools worked really, really hard to ensure that they could still have those offerings at every school and use the space that's available. Not ideal, but I think from this year, we've learned some lessons about how we could plan differently moving into the next year, having more time to prepare for that.
But you don't foresee that we could do anything immediate? Is that what I hear you saying?
Immediately to...
There's some class, I'm hearing from people that there's overcrowding in music and physical education. I mean, that's not the subject matter today, but 75 kids in the gym is in my estimation, ridiculous. So, I mean, these are realities.
I was waiting to see if you. So 2 years ago, when we bargained the contract, or actually 3 years ago, when we brought in early release, we had built in the regular contract 50-minute blocks.
Right.
And so we signed an MOU with KEA for 2 years to go back to 40-minute blocks. That would reduce the number of specialists, the number of classes being run. So that worked. It worked fine for space. It worked fine for staffing. We learned this year that KEA did not want to sign another MOU, and so we needed to revert to the contract language that was bargained, which was a 50-minute. So we implemented, as we are required to do per the CBA. At this point, we are, I want to say, stuck with it, but it is the language that was bargained. It is what we staff for, and it is what we have in our facilities. We are going into an open bargain. KEA has already indicated that they know that we both want to come to the table and discuss this and look at a lot of different options so that we can rectify any space issues and staffing issues.
But nothing immediate we can do, right? Is that what I hear you saying?
No.
Okay.
Cannot build any
Thank you.
additional space, cannot change the contract at this point.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. So I wanted to, we only have 10 minutes, but quickly, wanted to ask about the high school without the choir program. I'm assuming that's Kent Lake. Okay. So how are we, I loved being at the last honor concert and seeing the sort of collaborative effort between schools. How are we going to engender that kind of spirit where, you know, has there been any discussions about schools sort of merging
Absolutely, we were
programs?
discussing, there was a focus on that. The course was actually put up to be offered for this coming year, but then when we faced the IVTs, you know, with the involuntary transfers and the reductions, that had to go. And that makes sense. I mean, if you've never staffed a class before and you've got to cut something I haven't done yet, something I've got going, it makes sense and it's understandable. But to get that back, it's going to take a multi-year process. We need to continue to build the elementary school choirs, which out in that strand are actually really strong. And many of those students want to continue on. We need to address the choir issue at the one middle school that feeds into Kent Lake, because they're one of the 2 that does not have a choir. So we do not have a set feeder going into that, to build into that. And then, you know, staffing that, how we choose to staff that position of the choir between those 2 schools and what else may be there. There is interest. When they put the class up, there was enough interest in the class for it to make. It was just a matter of the finances that took place this fall. So I think that if you're asking what can be done soon, that's one of those things that can be done very soon.
Good to hear. And then my second question has to do with arts. You mentioned PE, K through 6 general art, and then we talked a little bit about art exploration. Why couldn't we begin that earlier? I think you mentioned in the secondary, I'm not sure, the arts exploration part. Is it a funding issue? I know we have volunteers now in our K through 6, some schools, not all. So how are we going to expand that? I know, are you planning to have 1 instructor per school, or what does that look like?
Well, ideally that would be nice, but in the immediate, no, we need to build that need. We need time to build a solid curriculum so that whoever we bring in, whoever decides to take that position, is on solid footing, teaching with full rigor and fidelity and standards-based and to the quality that we would want it to be, so that it's successful from day one.
So it'll be a revolving.
There are several models that we can address for that. I mean, one could be co-taught and revolving around through that way. It could be someone who is versed in the arts, in multiple arts, which is a harder model, of course, to find somebody, but there certainly are people out there that way. I think the most important thing is that we're not trying to put a Band-Aid on an open wound here, that we're actually doing it with surgical precision, finding the best qualified and certified people so we can have that success from day one that will lead us to a program of excellence right out the gate.
So I have a question. So thinking about our diversity, I'm wondering, is there going to be a culturally relevant approach to the arts and to the music? Are you going to incorporate culturally relevant music and a variety of musics to help attract? Because I know one of the challenges is kids get to choose it, and they don't always choose it. And so thinking about maybe the why they don't choose it. Are they exposed to music and arts that are relevant to their cultures and to their interests? And will that be a focus of the curriculum and the program that you bring in?
Absolutely, and we need to become more engendered in that. As you know, the arts are one of the ways that we understand culture. They're one of the basic definers. If you want to understand a culture, you can go to the art, you can go to the dance, you can go to the music. That we would not incorporate that into the curriculum just doesn't make sense, especially given the fact that we're so diverse. We need to embrace the cultures that we have, and we need to embrace the cultures that our students don't get to experience. The role of school being to bring in what our students can't get in their everyday life. So we need to have stuff to where they feel connected, they feel bonded, that other members of our community, other diverse communities can connect within the district through that artistic understanding. And we need to have a curriculum. That's why we're building the frameworks now with a strong eye towards those kind of the multicultural element and the diversity element, so that it is relevant, that it does make sense to them, and it's something that they want to continue doing because it connects them to the community and the school.
So who is involved in the building of the curriculum? I mean, when you say you're building it diversely, who are you bringing in to bring in those perspectives?
We're going by several things. We're going by best research practices that we know across the industry by reading and discussing this with experts. We're building teams of teachers in the various areas across all disciplines that are to look to that, and with that, they have the charge of looking at the relevance of the materials that are being brought in to go there. And when we need to seek it, we're going to be sending out notices to our diverse communities and asking them what, if we have someone from a certain country or a certain culture, what were the songs of your youth? We'll go find them and include them. Because one of the aspects that we don't get, and I know we're out of time here, but one of the aspects that we're not dealing with, and that's in my other hat as world language, is we teach a certain amount of languages, but our students who are second generation start to lose their home culture, their native culture, because they're immersed in our culture, and they lose that connection except for what they happen to get at home. They're not directly experiencing it. So we need to create experiences where they can not only experience the diversity of what else is out there, but they can maintain the connection to their own ethnic heritage.
Any other questions? Well, I'd just like to thank you, Dr. White and Dr. Corby, for a really exciting hour presentation. I appreciate your work, and I'm excited to see more arts and music in the schools. Over the years, I know our community is crying for it, so thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity to share this evening.
Okay, we're excused and going into executive session.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Hey, you went this way? No.
Yeah, we're just setting all this stuff. Close the program. Okay. You're good to go.
Thank you.
We do know that there are space.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Is that a full bottle of water? They're both full.
Is this Leslie?
Oh, we don't know where this was, do we?
Right here.
Maya? Darn it.
Nice job, guys.
Thank you.
This can work here, 5 to 5. I didn't know if you need that little thing on there for this.
That's-
or not. Yeah.
I mean, unless you want me to set this up here, and you can put that away now. That's fine. You want to do that? Okay.
take it, yeah. Thank you.
Are you kidding? He's pissed at Lola.
It's like the way they
So there was a reason. Yeah, okay, all right.
Yeah, Michael. Yeah. And I'm so glad it was my oldest because after that.
I mean, it would have been.
Actually, I guess the one contact for the bar. I think actually.
That's not.
No, that's
170 font there.
Well, that means if I was stroke is the point. That was a stroke check. Well, I remember when
He selects the meals, he serves the meals,
Let's see what the alternatives are.
Am I right? 1 minute. I'm thinking. My favorite. 1 minute. Okay. Okay. I'll get there eventually. Okay.
Count this way. 1, 2, 3.
Yes, you can. Thank you. Okay. Oh, dollars. Dollars. We're now calling the board meeting, the general board meeting to order at 7:01. Dr. Watts, is there any changes to the agenda? Oh, excuse me. Well, I'm at the wrong thing. Forgive me. I'll get there. Okay. Wade Behringer, would you like to lead us in flag salute tonight?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oops. I'd like to welcome all of the audience tonight. It's good to see you all here tonight. This is a meeting of the Kent School District Board, which is held in public to comply with the Open Public Meeting Act. The purpose of the board meeting is for the board to conduct its business in public. During the meeting, the board will listen to but not respond to comments for visitors. Those wishing to comment must complete a comment card and give it to the board secretary before the meeting begins, or no later than agenda item 4.0. Presentations. No cards will be accepted once the presentations have begun. Abusive public comments personally directed towards staff members will not be tolerated. The president may interrupt or terminate an individual's statements when it is too lengthy, obscene, or irrelevant. When it is your turn to address the board, please state your name at the start of your testimony. Please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. You will hear a timer when 3 minutes are up. Visitors who have completed a comment card indicating a desire to speak to an agenda item will be called at that portion of the agenda. Okay. Per board procedure, written material to provide board members with background information should be submitted to the superintendent's office at least 1 week in advance of the meeting. Okay. 1.06, agenda review. Dr. Watts, are there any changes to the agenda?
Thank you, President Hamada. Members of the board, Ms. Howley, please know that there are no changes to the agenda this evening.
Board directors, do you have any changes that you'd like to add to the agenda? We have 2 board directors this evening, Director Bettinger and Director Bowen, Director Bowen is ill tonight. She's had the flu. She had the flu starting on our Saturday retreat, so unfortunately it continues. And Director Bettinger had surgery Monday, so she's not feeling too great tonight, too. So we're lean and mean tonight. And both of their absences are excused absences, for the record. I am now going to call on Dr. Watts to give his superintendent's report.
Thank you again, President Hamada, members of the board, Ms. Howley, community, staff, and friends. I would first like to note that this report will focus on our core business of teaching and learning, certainly with an emphasis on learning. First, Omron Corporation STEM grant update. This update highlights the work that's taking place in our digital learning team, who actively works with our middle schools in implementing maker spaces. Thanks to our board-approved STEM grant provided by Kent Schools Foundation, the Omron Corporation supports our teacher librarians library paras at each of our schools who've assisted the digital learning team with those maker projects. The opportunity to incorporate planning, design thinking, creativity, collaboration, and troubleshooting are skills that we want our students to know and to master while they are with us as students, but certainly as they leave us as graduates. Focus on our English language arts and social studies. Teaching and Learning hosted an Actively Learn training session in this boardroom not too long ago, and among them participants were elementary and secondary ELA and social studies teams of teachers and district staff. Had the opportunity to learn alongside for a portion of that opportunity for professional development. We learned additional ways to use the tool to help explore how data can inform instruction and how we might differentiate for the varying needs of our student learners as well as the adults who are supporting them. Fine arts, for those of you who had the opportunity to join us for the work session, had the opportunity to see and experience the world of fine arts. Health and fitness and world language were also discussed. Our focus on K-6 general music teachers met recently to dive deep into the frameworks for general music. The emphasis is to be placed on the development of a district-wide vision, aligning our goals to state and national standards, and also developing a new model for 4th grade exploratory learning and 6th grade arts integration and exploration. An update for the transportation grant, and this grant supports our ability to transport on a daily basis 10,000 students to and from school and home each day. But specifically, the Department of Ecology has awarded Kent School District the grant funding that's necessary for the purchase of up to 3 all-electric school buses, and Kent School District is required to respond to the Department of Ecology with preliminary vehicle and infrastructure pricing by mid-February. And with that, our facilities team is continuing to work hard, and we see individuals who are here who can speak to that and attest in our conversation that we've had. I appreciate the work with our electrical contractor to develop a design and price estimation for a charging station that will support these buses. So we are excited for the opportunity to continue to safely transport our students while also helping to take good care of our environment. And with that, while many of the reports that I share with you today are supported by what I'm going to share with you now, based on the election results that were certified on February 21st, I extend an official and resounding thank you. A thank you to 54.7% of our voting public who said yes. Yes to student safety and school security. Yes to career readiness. Yes. Yes. We said yes to career readiness programs, including STEAM opportunities, bullying prevention, and social emotional learning programs. Who said yes to educational support for students who need additional supports and services to be successful in our learning environments. Who said yes to successful, clean, healthy, and well-maintained school buildings and facilities. Who also said yes to ongoing job-embedded professional development for our staff, our amazing teachers and support staff and central office administrators, essential staff positions as well, including our classroom teachers, our nurses, our counselors, our social workers, and our bus drivers, and those positions are not fully funded by our state, all for this purpose. And I see some examples of our primary focus, which is our students. So remember, when our schools are strong, our community thrives. We thank you again for your continued support. President Amata, that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Dr. Watts. Now we're moving on to 3.01, and that's a legislative update. Director Vanda Gosselin, would you like to give your update, please?
Yes, I will. Thank you, President Hamada. Thank you, Dr. Watts, for acknowledging our levy partners who helped get us a win in that, and thank you so much for our educators in particular for all the work that they did to help us with the levy. I wanted to just kind of give a brief update about I guess, week 7 of our legislative session. As you know, we're in a very short session, 2 months, and it will be concluding on March 12th. From what I'm hearing, there are about 300 education bills that were introduced, and we're down to about 80, 40 in the House and 40 in the Senate. A couple of things that have come up this past week or so on sexual health education bill that has come out. It's been very controversial, a lot of public input into this. And Superintendent Reichdahl's office wanted to be very clear in stating that this is not something new in our state, that sexual health education has been taught for many years in our state, and that OSBI is not developing a curriculum. So one of the things that they wanted to make very clear to our families is that parents can review the curriculum, and they've always been allowed to opt out their children from the program. And the school district has to abide by that opting out language, and so that's a very strict language that's in the bill. So that was one of the big bill that was under discussion this past week. There are several bills that have passed the Senate or passed the House, but it's in the other area right now under discussion. Superintendent Reichdahl believes the dual credit bill will actually go through. It's going to cost extra money, and that, of course, is to pay for courses that will earn college and high school credits, college and the high school, running start programs, so forth. And then in terms of SPED, as I mentioned in the last meeting, the legislators were very clear that this particular session, there's not going to be a lot of money going into education, if any. And so special education, even though there might be a slight ask for support services, we won't see much money coming through until next year. So a couple of things that I wanted to bring to the board, and we don't have our full board here, but it is getting time for us as a board to present to WASDA our own proposals. And other districts have asked us to bring a couple of proposals to the table, and I will detail them out at the next meeting. One is the work group that was formed to provide recommendations on how we implement Initiative 1351, which was passed by voters a few years ago to reduce class sizes and add more support staff. But the work group recommended smaller class sizes for high poverty schools, but they didn't recommend higher support staff allocations for high poverty schools. So it's something that Tequila has brought to our attention, and they're asking if we would co-sponsor that, and wanted to bring that to the board. And I'll bring the entire proposal in next meeting for us to discuss. But I would also like for us to consider submitting a proposal mainly to talk about the how to fund the impacts of the ESHB 2610, which is the Hunger-Free Students' Bill of Rights. And that is where we're feeding our children regardless of families' ability to pay, and the unintended consequences of that. And I appreciate Dr. Harmon bringing that to our attention. It has cost over $125,000 in 4 months, and it really has nothing to do with community eligibility program, and I think that's a confusion on the part of our community. So I will draft that one out for consideration as well, and if any of the board members have additional things that they would like to consider, I would encourage bringing it to staff, and then we can write up a proposal. We used to be very active with WASDA on this, but I don't know, somewhere along the line, we dropped off. And so I'd like for us to become more active and have a bit bigger voice at the table on that. So that's about it. And then there are other bills that are passing, but I can put it up if people are interested. I'm happy to give a legislative update on the bills that are currently in the Senate and the House.
Thank you very much, Director Vandegosselen. I fully support that second proposal. I think that's a good one. I'll be anxious to see the final draft on that. We're moving on to 4.01, and we do have Mr. Ken Smith has asked to testify prior to that.
Thank you, Board. Thank you, Superintendent Watts, Ms. Howley. So I have just a couple quick items on both 01 and 02, but I think I can get in 3 minutes. So first, thank you for meeting on Saturday. I was here with you in 2 long Saturday mornings, so beginning of February and just this last one, and a lot that covered. And in terms of the finance training from WASDA, also the National School Board Association. When I was a school board member, it was fabulous. I really strongly encourage you to go and get that email. In terms of 12-month projections, it'll be in the slides coming up shortly. It's gone from being about a break even to about a $4.3 million deficit. And I sent, as soon as I saw that, I called Mr. Rarick, and I assume we'll talk about that. The other thing I noticed is there's $9 million in the assigned fund balance, and I don't recall what happened or when that happened. So that's money that you can use that's not like completely unrestricted, is unassigned, and assigned has been kind of softly moved with a plan for something. So it's not in the report. I just don't know what that is. I hadn't seen that before. It might have been talked about. The other thing, I gave you the finance comments from December 11th. There were 5 of those items. The Clark-Newper report still hasn't been publicly shared, their results. The internal auditors, I strongly encourage you, as you go through your budget process, you have a policy that asks you to have an internal auditor. I don't believe you do. I just found out that Bellevue has one, so now Tacoma, Bellevue, North Shore, and Seattle all have internal auditors. And I think, collaborating with them could get a work group. The task force plan was talked about on Saturday, and I encourage you to keep up with that. The citizen finance review has not yet been talked about in public that I know of, and I think there's some good information there. And then the budget policy, which does mention the internal auditor. And then last, I sent you an email yesterday, and I look forward to hearing a response from each of you. Thank you.
All right. Moving on to 4.01, the budget status update. Dr. Watts, would you like to introduce, please?
Absolutely. I would like to note that Dr. Harmon and Ben Rarick, who have worked tirelessly and with team to support our budget status report. I'll ask Ben Rarick to report to the podium and provide our budget status report. Thank you, Ben. The floor is yours.
Good evening, board members. So my suggestion would be, so you have 2 items in your packet. You have the December financial statement, and you also have our preliminary January. I'm going to focus on the preliminary January. Happy to answer any questions you have about the December financial statement, but the preliminary January represents the most up-to-date and timely information we have. So I imagine that would be what you would be most interested in. Okay, so we're following the, for now, the same structure. I will take a quick minute to note that we've been moving right along as a fiscal recovery task force. I think I got the phrase right. And I think maybe next meeting, if not the next meeting, the meeting after that, we're going to start putting some figures in front of you, or visuals that we'll do a beta. We'll try it out and see what you like and what you don't like. Okay, so before I kind of get into the numbers, I think maybe a good summary statement for January. January is an important month for school districts because that's when you really start to get apportionment statements that reflect kind of a truing up of your reality. So a lot of the estimates of revenue that you get in the fall are based on your estimates. And then in January, OSPI looks at your enrollment and starts giving you revenue amounts that are kind of trued up or reconciled to the actual number of students that you're starting to report to them. And so it starts to get kind of real in January, if that makes some sense, okay? And then so if you take nothing else from this presentation, why don't you just take this summary statement. Both our revenues and our expenditures are projected to be less, okay? So we project to receive less money. We'll get into that a little bit. And we're bringing down the expenditure projection just a bit for a variety of reasons, okay? So speaking first to slide 1, now remember when we're through January, we're talking about being 5/12ths of the way through the fiscal year. So that's 41.67% through the year. Right now, we've spent 37.58% of our budget. Excuse me, that's revenues. We've received 37.58% of our budget. This is, in most respects, what we would expect to see, except for our 3,000 and 4,000. So 3,000 is the state general purpose. That's the state apportionment, okay? That's the largest sum. 4,000 is some of our categorical programs. We are projected to receive a little bit less in those categories than we had estimated, and I'll get into that later. Okay. On the expenditure side, we are, again, 41.7% of the way through the year. And we are less than that, 37.42% of percent budget spent. So that seems to be a relatively safe space to be in. When you look at our individual programs, our larger programs like Basic Ed and Inclusive Ed are both within the range we would expect and also just a little bit lower than last year. Most of our programs are in the high 30s. We have a couple programs, career and technical education and compensatory ed, that are our lowest spending at this time. I would expect that number to increase in the second half of our fiscal year. Okay, expenditures by object. Probably the major takeaway from here is that you see that our compensation numbers are pretty tight. So when we're 41% of the way through the year, on the 1920 line, averaging all of 2, 3, and 4,000, we're at 39.3%. That's pretty tight in terms of, you know, what we budgeted to. And so that's good. That's a stable situation. Our 5, 7, 8, and 9,000 budgets, those don't tend to be linear in the same way, right? So some of these accelerate in the spring, some of them accelerate in the summer, so it's not necessarily, you know, like you can't say like 40, it should be exactly at 41.7%. But overall, spending is projecting to come down a little bit, which turns out to be a good thing because revenue is projected to be down. So in this slide, what you're seeing is our actual revenue in January of this year versus our actual revenue of last year. And you see negative 4.5% in state general apportionment there. So there's a couple things going on. One of them is expected in the sense that, you remember we talked about the state kind of changed the percentage they were going to give us each month. So we're already going to be a little less each month just because they're trying to hold some back for the summer to benefit their accounting method. Okay, you following me on that? So that's not any reflection on us necessarily. But we are going to receive, even when you take aside that, we are going to receive a little less in state general apportionment. We got pretty close on the class size allocation, but we are going to receive just a little bit less in state general apportionment. You know, when they fund you at 17 to 1, we're at like 17.6, 17.5. And so every district, we're certainly not the only district in that situation. Every district kind of has to make a decision between whether to hire more staff and to hit that number. Well, you spend money to get the money. And so January is the first number you get. It's really the first time you really understand where you're at. We're pretty close, but there is a little gap. And so we see that in our apportionment projection. Additionally, we got a notice from the state that our pupil transportation funding is less than anticipated. That one's a little harder to unpack because they use a regression analysis to determine how much money each school district's going to get. It's a little bit of a black box. That's a statistical method. And so I'm not able to sit here and explain one individual factor that explains why we're going to get less than pupil transportation, but we are going to get less in pupil transportation. So that negative 4.5%, I don't want to be too alarmist. We're fine. It's just that it is going to be less on the revenue side, it appears. So on these two slides, on the bottom, you see the red number there? So on the revenue side, you see about 401 million. On the expense side, you see about 405 million. So if all things remain the same, and I will say that this is pretty early, we're in January. So I expect that as we get numbers through the spring, and there is a couple of outstanding issues that we have with the state, for example, this will sharpen up a bit. So pretty early. But at this point, we are projected to spend a little bit more than we are to receive this year. We're within, I think, an acceptable range. I'm not alarmed by that, given that we have a fund balance. But ideally, we want to be tight there, right? So we, as was mentioned in testimony, there is a small projected operating deficit, not an actual the deficit you've been through before, where you had no fund balance. That's a different thing. And so something we need to closely monitor. And I would say it is less significant as a factor this year. It is more significant as a budgeting measure next year. So if we know that our current mix of, we've added staff, as you'll see in a graph. So we've made some collective bargaining agreements. We have added some staff. We've kind of normalized a little bit. And we're seeing what that means in terms of a total projected expense for a year. And once we get in the spring and we kind of see what that is, that will be very, very, very instructive for budgeting next year. Okay, enrollment's fine. We're pretty tight in enrollment. Our projected AAFT versus what we budgeted to, we're still on top by 113 students. So we did a good job of projecting. But one thing to keep an eye on this chart here is, and I think I've been over this with you before, but if you take a really close look at the blue and the gray lines, and you compare it to the yellow, which is last year, you see that our spring behavior was very different last year. We really stabilized in the yellow. You see that, how it goes just flat? Whereas in almost every prior year, we experienced a meaningful decline either in February, March, or April. And so we're watching very closely to see what materializes in February, March, or April. Is yellow our new normal, or do we return to the shape of the curve, as it were, from the prior years? Okay. And so that completes my presentation at this point. It's pretty early, and I hesitate to obviously to make fund balance projections in January, but I think we do finally have some information that allows us to start to look at the year as a whole. And what I'm looking at is, now that we have normalized to some extent, can we match expenses to revenue? And then what does that mean for budgeting next year? I will hasten to add that as celebratory as it is that we passed the levy, and it does indeed reflect an increase, keep in mind that levy only accounts for 6 months of next year, right? We collect taxes on a calendar year. Next year is a full school year. That first collection won't be to the second half of next school year. You following me on that? Okay. We will continue to collect under the current taxing system until the completion of the current calendar year, which runs through the first half of next school year. So the actual amount of the increase next year, people will go, wait, I thought we had an increase, the taxpayers supported us. That will stagger over a couple school years. Thank you very much.
there a possibility I can ask a question?
Oh, yeah, of course.
I know you got away there really quick.
Well, if you stand here, it becomes, if you just stand here, it becomes something of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you're like, look at.
I was just curious. As we're normalizing our school district a little bit, and you're saying that we probably have another year and a half to really normalize with the levy, is our 5-year projections down the road, are we going to get to a point where we can really understand how much we can grow?
Sure. That's a big question. Let me try to break it down a little bit. I think the couple very simple ways to think about the 4-year and the 5-year projections, and that is that state funding is still far and away the largest source of revenue that we get, right? And the state has pretty much already told us. They passed a law and they said, here's pretty much how much you can expect each year. And it's a lot less than what we used to expect each year in terms of increases, right? They're saying IPD is really what we can expect. Well, what's the history of IPD? Like 1.5%, 2%, right? So, and we passed a levy, and I'm very grateful for that. And it does over time represent a modest but meaningful increase in funding. That is a very small part of overall pie.
Right.
And it's a very small part. It is a meaningful part, but it is a proportionally smaller part of the overall pie. And so if you just think about revenues and you just try to make it very simple, by far and away, the largest part of our revenues is going to grow at a very small rate, according to the state, according to current law, right? And so it's like, as you build expenses over time and you're looking at your largest pot of funding that's going to grow at this very small amount, well, how are you going to pay for any new expenses that you introduce? Are you going to assume that revenue materializes in some way, or how does that, what's that calculus? So, your 4-year outlook depends to a great degree about what you assume about your behavior. If you're going to behave the way that you behaved in the past, so I have done 4-year outlooks before, which I've been criticized for, but nevertheless, I assumed that the district would grow at the rates that it used to grow, because that's the only real data you have. You can project anything you want, but I can look at the years where the district operated, pre-deficit and say, there's a pattern of behavior here. So it's very sensitive to that assumption about, what is your future behavior? So can we get to a point where we have a clear picture? Yes. The answer to that is yes. Is it a sensitive projection based on your assumption about what a board 4 years from now will be deciding? Absolutely. And so that's probably the best way I can answer that, but I think that nugget of information about the revenue side and how limited that may be is a key thing to know.
You always help me because I'm a very proactive person, and this helps me understand when I hear it from your words. For some reason or other, we're clicking.
Oh, that's good.
And I appreciate that. And could I possibly sum that up in very graduated, slow growth, if any, is kind of the way we want to be looking at things?
Yes. Yes. I mean, except for some unforeseen or extenuating thing, unless the legislature convenes and all of a sudden decides to increase state property tax again, or which none of us think will actually happen, you kind of have to take the state at its word that here's what we're projecting for your revenue, so might as well plan on that. And now we know what our local revenue will be. So, on the revenue side, we have a pretty good sense. If enrollment is flat, it's really about how are we going to behave as a district on the expense side.
And our projections with our students for the class size and stuff, it looks like that was very well done.
Yeah, it was pretty tight. I mean, the enrollment projections were really tight, and HR hit their numbers pretty close. You know, you're dancing on a head of a pin. I mean, I don't know how much closer you can really expect to be.
Anyway, I appreciate all the hard work. Thank you. Did anybody else, I'm sorry, did anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, it's okay. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
All right, moving on.
Good. Thank you, Ben. Ben. You're all set. You-
Is he going to do the December?
So,
Okay.
he just does.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the confusion. So, with your indulgence, my thought was that I would focus on the January update. The December financial statement includes and then supplements.
Okay.
Unless there are any questions about the December financial statement, I would be complete with my presentation.
And I have a question. We have sort of talked about, maybe this is for another meeting, but we talked about at the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee.
Oh, that's right. We have there's a new name, right? I apologize.
No longer
I
fiscal
apologize.
recovery. So we talked about presenting information in such a way that it is much more usable and
Yeah.
understandable.
Yep.
Do you have, can you give us some ideas of what you're thinking? I know you've
Sure.
always wanted to change this
Yeah,
presentation.
yeah. I mean, I think I've shared with some of you that, you know, when I first got here, I wanted to do sort of a more visually graphic sort of thing, but you were also invested in your new way of looking at it. I guess you just started it. So, and we were kind of in a very emergency situation there. So we stayed with that. But I'm pleased that there's this kind of new look to, so the idea would be take you out of all this data. Like, you know, it's really not a best practice to just drench a board in data. You're supposed to interpret that data for them and and say, are we all right or aren't we? And then if they ask questions, you take them into the data, but the data can be overwhelming, and really you're trying to kind of fit the presentation to the audience. And so the idea would be that you would have some graphics that would say, you know, this is on track or this isn't, across a range of indicators. And then to the extent that one of them was off track, you could ask questions, and then we could get into the data if you wanted to. But it's, you know, for 2 years, we've been giving you a lot of data, mostly because, you know, wanted to show as much transparency and make sure that everybody could see everything given the events of the past. But really to get to a best practice space, that it's way too much data, I think, for a monthly board presentation, in my opinion. And so this sort of more graphical representation will kind of allow you to, I think, operate at a board member level and then delve deeper if you want to, rather than starting with what is a lot of technical data. So,
Well, will it still have some of the comparative data? Because I think that's helpful.
Yeah, so
I don't want a lot of that to go away. I
Yeah.
mean, I agree that it's really important for
Yeah.
layperson to understand.
yeah, and I'll say, like, when the fiscal, the
Finance.
citizens,
CFAC.
that, I know, I've enjoyed working with them, so I don't mean that in any pejorative sense. I just can't remember the new acronym, but yeah, we kind of, like, I showed them the one that I developed 2 years ago, and we started from there, and they had some criticisms of that, which was helpful. And they actually said, oh, it's oversimplified, you know, so we kind of went back and forth a little bit. And so a lot of the stuff that you get now, you know, the thought is maybe we make it as an appendix to the financial report, so you still see it, but you don't lose it. So particularly in your case, you've had 2 years of kind of acclimating your eye to it, and you might want to still have that. But so we'll try something out and then just,
It's just important for the public to understand the cyclical nature
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
patterns.
Yeah.
Because as you hear, the comparative data is so important.
Right.
And people will say, well, you're in the deficit again.
Yeah.
And that's not the message you want.
Yeah.
They need to understand the patterns.
yeah, absolutely. And the other thing we've talked about briefly is, yeah, I don't prolong the conversation, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you.
Director, Vice President, you're good? Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay,
So that
thank you.
concludes it. You can run now. Out the door if you want to, I guess. We're on to 5.0, Board of Directors discussion and approval. And 5.01, resolution number 1578, certified signatures on real estate transactions. I would like to ask a board member to make a motion.
I move to approve Agenda Item 5.01, Resolution Number 1578, certified signatures on real estate transactions.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that resolution number 15.78, certified signatures on real estate transactions. We'll now have a discussion or questions.
I do not have any questions.
And I don't have any. Thank you very much. I will now call for a vote on that resolution, 1578. All those in favor, raise your right hand and say yay.
Aye.
Or aye. All those opposed, raise your right hand and say nay. The motion carries. Up to 5.02, inclusive education out-of-district placements, Heartspring. I would like to entertain a motion from a board member on this issue.
I move to approve Agenda Item 5.02, Inclusive Education Out-of-District Placements, Heartspring.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded to the issue at 5.02, inclusive education out-of-district placements, Heartspring. Now, I would like discussions or questions from directors.
I do not have any questions on this.
And I do not also, so thank you very much. I'd now like to have a vote on that. All those in favor of the motion, say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
All those opposed, raise your right hand and say nay. The motion carries. All right, we're on to 6.0, consent agenda. And I don't have any cards on that one either, so. Anyone on the board, do they wish to pull anything on the consent agenda? I will entertain a motion to accept 6.01, 6.02, 6.03, 6.04, 6.05, 6.06, 6.07. If I could have a motion on all, acceptance of all those on the consent agenda.
I make a motion that we accept 6.6 consent agenda, 6.01, 02, 03, 04, 05, 06, and 07.
And I'll second.
Is there any discussion or questions regarding this, directors?
No, I do not.
Boy, we're moving right down the line tonight, aren't we? And I have none. So all those in favor of the motion that was just read, say aye by raising your right hand.
Aye.
Those opposed, aye. The motion carries. We're now up to 7.0, informational. Okay. Okay, the following items are informational only. No action is required. 7.01, in-touch online cash receipt payment system in elementary schools. And who's presenting that?
Doing that first, or? Should I go ahead? Okay.
About the
No.
7.01,
No.
just information.
Okay, so this is structured as informational in nature, so we know that we have something on the horizon. We haven't yet engaged the vendor. We kind of know the size and scope of the project, so we are trying to kind of front-end apprise the board. Some of you were on the board last year, others of you weren't, but just as a recap, for years, we had a quite antiquated point-of-sale system. So if you're in a school, if you were at French Field for a football game, the mechanisms by which you could pay, our swipe, our card swipe system, both in schools and online, was antiquated. No other districts used that system. It wasn't fully compliant with what we would call PCI standards, which are the legal standards for, protections for use of credit cards. And so last year we started phase 1, implementation. It's generally not advisable to phase in all schools in a large school district all at once. You generally want to stagger this, so you learn some lessons and you limit the number of sites you have to work with. So last year we phased in with our secondary schools and was generally successful in that phase in. And so sometime in a future board meeting, probably in about a month, we will be coming to you with a standard sort of contract approval request like you've received with so many others, because I think it will exceed $25,000, although not by much, to phase in the elementaries. The secondaries have much more volume. That was another reason why we started with them. But lumping in the elementaries adds obviously a lot more sites, right? So we'll be coming to you with this contract, and the urgency of it, if there is any, is that right now we're in a system of limbo where we've got half of our schools using the new system. We're not exactly half, but we have some of our schools, our secondary schools, using the new InTouch system, and then we have schools on the old system that is really no longer supported from a technology standpoint. And we're anxious to start the phase in at the end of this school year, preparing for the beginning of next year, so that literally every school in the Kent School District is now on the modern, most frequently used point-of-sale platform in Washington State through InTouch software. So I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, but at this point, this is purely informational at this stage.
No, I didn't. Director. I don't have a question, I have a comment. I do appreciate that you put the link into this informational for anyone that wants to take a look
Sure.
at what we approved, or what the materials that were presented back in November of 2018. So thank you for that.
Sure. And I think Auburn is an InTouch as well, I believe, yeah.
I don't pay bills there, just here. So I don't know.
Sure, does what you do. I'm just curious, so far you've, introduced it, are you liking it?
Yeah, I mean, it's, for some of our staff, it's just an enormous improvement. There were some implementation bumps along the way, for sure. And one of them is that we tried to pull this off by not hiring any additional staff, to just kind of implement the system with the people we had, and having already experienced budget cuts in that area, it really was a stretch of finding who can actually assist out there. But the technology was so far and away superior, and you could actually collaborate with our neighboring school districts because they use it too, that it has really kind of put us in a fundamentally different spot. The old system used to go down for a week or two, and people would be stranded in terms of being able to do transactions.
All right, thank you very much. We're on to 7.02, Safety Services Replacement Vehicle Purchase Order. Any questions?
Discussions?
I don't think I have any either. Any information we're receiving on that tonight other than that it's there?
It's there.
It's just there? Help me, it's just there.
Yes, members of the board, President Hamada, Dr. Watts. Sorry about that. Yeah, this is a vehicle that purchased a couple of years ago. It was totaled, and it's just sharing with you informationally that it has been replaced. The only cost to us is the line item for $6,811, where we had to redo the decals and lighting and that, so just informational. Most of it covered by insurance.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Moving on to 7.03, Kent Schools Foundation Enrichment Grants. Questions, discussion, is there anyone to speak to that tonight, or is that just out there?
Well, first, I just want to thank all of our partners and for all the work that they do, and I really appreciate seeing the list of our awardees. It's quite a diverse group of schools, and I appreciate that the teachers have taken time to support equity in our schools. In particular, that was really I was really happy to see that. I guess, one of the questions I had was, I know being part of the foundation in the early days, there were questions about donors choose, and, has this sort of replaced donors choose, or are there still teachers doing donors choose? And how is it different if they were to buy supplies through the grants? Do they keep it in their classroom? How does that work if they transfer? Or
Yeah. Thank you, Director Vendegoslem. It does not replace anything that our schools, teachers can apply for grant-wise. It supplements the process of any grant application. And the foundation is just really proud to offer and go all of the funds that are raised through our events and go directly back into our classrooms in our schools. And so we are excited to continue to do that and looking at different ways to do that. These classroom grants, we did 2 cycles last year, this 1 cycle this year, and so no, it doesn't replace any other opportunity outside of the foundation. So, but they do get to keep anything that they get, and whether it's an experience, a one-time experience, or materials, it is the teachers or the schools to keep. And so whether it's this time we had a whole 6th grade cohort at a particular school get supplemental instructional materials that Teaching and Learning did review and prove, and it was supplemental, that they'll get to keep. And so the next class will get to use those as well. So it's not just a one-time use. But there are experiences, so obviously that can't be passed down, but that learning and enrichment can be shared with other classes in the school, so maybe that can be brought back in different ways. So.
Great, thank you.
No, I just also want to say thank you. It is really wonderful to see all the awards, and thank you to all the staff members that take the time to actually fill out the grants and do the work. So.
And I just might mention to the community, if you haven't looked into this, $14,177 from our community for special projects, all the way from buddy benches to building bridges to STEM, or STEAM actually, robotics, all kinds of things. And again, reiterated the fact that equity is all over this too. I'm impressed. And our community partners this community is very giving and very caring. And I'm just excited to see all these special projects going on because of our community, the partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are on to 8.0, and the first card, that's communication from the audience. And the first person on here. We have 3. We actually have one that came in a little later. Do you realize that you have to have that in by 4.0? Are you aware of that? Okay, we might want to talk about that a little later. We'll start with Brittany, is it Cleek?
Cleek, yes.
Thank you.
Good evening, board members. I'm one of your music itinerants in the district. I've been here for 4 going on 5 years, and I'm here to speak about the restructuring that's happening next year and some of the monies that are going with that. I just have some questions that I wanted the board and the community to consider. How can we implement IBTs without cutting our choir programs? It's across the state. I mean, this is not the only place we see it, but how can we implement technology and our STEAM classes without getting rid of some of our core art programs? Also, I was privy to the fact that we are looking at new curriculum for next year for 4th grade recorder and 5th grade orchestra. And I'm questioning why we're buying new curriculum when we have curriculum already provided for us that has been used across our state for over 50 years. I would also like you to consider, why are we bringing in outside certified teachers for restructuring for that exploration 4th grade class? As far as I know, I'm for us bringing in small ensembles and having students learn separately in small groups with keyboard and guitar and things like that, things that we're rotating now, but the kids don't get their hands on very often. But how are we going to put instruments in those hands when we, this year, we had $1,200 instruments short for our students in district. So restructuring to that new program, I'm not sure how we're balancing that money between small group practice and what we're already doing now. How do we intend, how will we provide, the schedule for next year in restructuring. I was seeing that we are looking at K3 4 times a week, which is what we're doing now at 50 minutes, and we're looking at going back to 30. My concern is 4th and 5th and 6th grade. As preparing for concertizing and performances, we're cutting that back to once a week. And I'm concerned. So we really need to look back and communicate with our district leaders and district music leaders and get their opinion on this. I haven't heard anything about this. I'm not sure that my colleagues have. We haven't heard anything. So we're kind of shaking in our boots going, wow, we have a completely restructured music program that I haven't seen in any of our our neighboring districts. How will you help principals this coming year with our new schedule again? Provide our itinerants with a schedule in time. This last year we had people, including myself, who I walked in my building and I didn't know what room I was going to. I didn't know what grade I was teaching. So we need some support from our district board to help principals and help our music department figure out how to get that equitable in time. Thank you, board members.
Thank you. Next is Miss Christy Thea.
Good evening, President. Is our community member who turned in her form late going to be able to speak tonight? Because I am willing to yield my time.
We are pretty short on time tonight, and I was going to ask for a special motion like we have done before. We do at some point have to start some policy, but as far as I'm concerned, we'll take that vote, and I will even bring that motion to the floor for her to speak tonight.
May I yield my time to her, or is that?
Just go ahead.
I think I will forego my comments this meeting and perhaps wait till the next one then. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's fine.
I just want to make sure there's time.
Next on is James Ort, I'm sorry.
Would you guys like me to stand here or get closer?
That's fine.
Okay. Hello, members of the school board and members of the public. My name is James Ort. I'm here to make this board known that the health, safety, physical harm, neglect of my special needs adopted daughter. Let me give you some insight about my 7-year-old daughter. She is autistic, G-tube fed, 100% dependability of adults for basic needs. She has been attending Jenkins Creek Elementary School since 2017. Since then, we have had nothing but problems with this school getting my daughter's needs as for her health, safety, basic needs, and education. Let me start with the health. She is depending on wearing diapers the whole time. Well, she never gets changed. She sits in them all day, every day. She comes home in somebody else's clothes or wet. She never gets fed on time or is lacking food or water. Her safety. She is a child who has seizures. She has a blue helmet she is supposed to wear outside. She never wears that. I bring this up because she has been left in her classroom by herself without any adults there. She has been left on numerous occasions this year, let alone. Let's go with physical harm and neglect. Since she is nonverbal and dependent on adults at this time to be moved around, she is placed in one spot and forgot about, left there to play with toys. While visiting this classroom to pick up my daughter, I have found a vape pen laying on the desk with the computer where the kids play and have unlimited access to. And yes, this is a chemical chamber that was on it. This is right before the whole vape pen incident with the lungs exploding and everyone getting sick. As for her IEP, it is without a doubt that this cannot happen without this district involvement to get all those involved with her needs be present. I have contacted the district directors for help to schedule meetings, which they have been done twice now since she's been there. And I'm grateful for that part. But this is with the district's involvement only. With that said, at this time, her IEP minutes are not being completed. I have asked for a one-on-one paraeducator to be placed with her in her classroom with every time being told no. Now I know why. There is a report that was done on the conduct that is being done in my daughter's classroom that was handed into the principal.
Thank you, sir. I will accept a motion to make an exception to our normal rule to add.
You don't need to do that.
I don't have to? Okay. Just go ahead? Okay, all right. Ms. Patri?
Shukri, board president.
Thank you.
Dr. Watts, members of the board. I was so caught up in the financial presentation. I just wanted to get this on the record following my public testimony. At the last board meeting, I had an opportunity to meet with Dr. Watts and board director Maya. And so on the record, I appreciate you for coming and connecting with families who had experienced discipline and getting the other side of the story, the qualitative side, and hearing their background and their experience in our district. And Maya, who after spending the whole day in Olympia, came at 9 p.m. to meet with one of the families. And so really appreciate your work on that. We have a state of the sort of a town hall discussion with Black families tomorrow night, happening at the YMCA in partnership with the Y. I'm also a board member with the Y, so that's happening at 5:30 to 8 p.m. Opportunity to have Black families dream about the kind of future that they want for their children, including what it looks like to be in this education system. So hopefully you can join us. I believe some district staff will come in as well.
Thank you very much. And I think I have a free night tomorrow. I might be there. So that would be good. That would be good. All right. Now we're on to board reports. Director Van de Goss.
Yeah.
Do you have anything?
Clarification, do we have okay. We have an evaluation meeting right, tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
So,
Sorry about that.
sorry, we wouldn't be able to be there tomorrow. Apologize.
We'll have other Other opportunities.
Another opportunity
Yes.
would be good.
Yes.
I can't keep my schedule straight anymore.
Yeah, I was thinking, did I miss something?
Sorry about that. Thursday just, I thought went.
That's why.
Okay.
All right, good.
Absolutely.
All right, yes, board discussion. I don't have anything. I just really appreciate, again, I echo what Dr. Watts said, to our educators, especially, of course, to our voters for passing the levy, but so many people work so hard on it, as always. And I thank our community members for all that they do for our school district. And I guess, I was really grateful to working with our colleagues at our retreat. I thought that was very productive, and we got through a number of policies, so that's a good thing. There are many others that we need to get through, so that worries me. But I thank Dr. Harmon and staff for getting all of that together for us and preparing it such that we can have access to it easily, and it was a good system that she put together for us with the IT. And let's see, what else? So I will be working on on the legislative proposals for WASDA, and so that'll be my next project. So thank you.
All right, I also don't have a lot, but I do want to thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the work that you do for our students and our community. I hope that some of you were able to have some time off over the break. I wasn't, but I hope you were. And I, too, appreciate the work that happens. And I think, it doesn't go unnoticed that, the board signs up to do this work. And when we sign up to do it all day on a Saturday, that also means staff has to show up at times. And I don't think that people really understand and appreciate the fact that staff give of their time as well, away from their families and away from their other obligations. So I just want you to know that's much appreciated and recognized, and we thank you so much for doing that and working with us moving forward. And I hope that others take the time to thank you as well for what you do. I had the opportunity Monday night to go to Pizza and Conversations with KEA, and it was wonderful as usual. We were able to have really good, great conversation, and I do look forward to having more of those. And I, again, thank you for being here tonight and wish you a wonderful evening. Thanks.
Well, I just want to kind of emphasize on our policy meeting on Saturday that this has been a real learning curve to me, because a while ago I considered going back to school and getting a law degree, and then I decided with the cost and the time commitment and my age that I wasn't going to do it. But I think I'm on a Excel course of policies, procedures, RCWs, and intertwining and best practices and just what's accepted to do. And so I knew this job going into it was probably going to be a pretty big job, but I didn't realize how much legal jargon, procedures, policies, and understanding that it takes to run this district. And eventually, I will get to that where I'm very good at it, and it will help me do my job, but right now I'm really struggling. So, and I spent probably, we only got through 8, which is quite a bit of policy changes that in one day's work, and I think that we did some quality work, quality conversations. But we had several others, and I went through all of those, making my comments on them. And you'd be surprised, and I'm not complaining, believe me, how much time commitment from a board member it takes to do this job. I mean, I knew that, but I guess I didn't really know it until I actually walked through it. So I just think it's important to realize that I'm trying to do my best. Everybody's up here trying to do their best, but I'm on a learning curve, so help me. And I've had several, I asked for comments and phone calls and emails, and boy, I've been getting them, and I'm trying to keep up with them. So thank you, and thank you for being here tonight. And thank you for all your involvement and all you do. And I'm just absolutely thrilled and a slightly bit surprised that the levy passed. So thank you, community. Thank you. And at that, I believe we're adjourned at 8:10.